Welcome back, ATO family. I'm Joe King. Today I'm with Randy Aguilar, and this is our 8th message from the host, but it's the Officer Next Door edition. The Officer Next Door started in 2018, and it's created by a former Dallas police officer I know very well, God's Country. He grew up in God's Country, Southeast, and he left the department and he moved out. Well, first moved to United States, but as an island. People can just kind of figure that out. He hides in anonymity as the Officer Next Door. Eventually, I'm going to have him on as his true identity, but we haven't got to that point yet. Officer Next Door, thank you for coming on. Welcome to the Bridge and the Divide.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right. Can you tell the listener just about your page, how it started, and we're going to get into your. I want to milk a story out of you later on of your career, because you have a great career. I mean, I know you very well. Mm-hmm. I've known you since you were a rookie at Southeast, but I want you to tell the listener a little bit about it, as much as you can, to kind of keep your identity secret. You're like Batman.
I'm a pretty open book.
Yeah. So tell them about.
Is this a mystery? I didn't know this was a mystery.
Yeah. Only his friends know who he is.
Oh,
yeah,
okay.
he keeps it anonymous.
Oh,
yeah.
Oh.
Well, I just don't put my mug out there. I don't put my face out there. I'm not taking selfies and putting it on Facebook. But so I use a pseudonym, I guess you could call it. But to answer your question, how basically this got started is, I left the department, like you said, in 2018. My wife and I, well, it wasn't the wife at the time, but we moved out to Hawaii. That's public knowledge. Basically, I was writing posts, post law enforcement when I left the Dallas Police Department. And I think you would probably agree, having known me since I was a rookie at Southeast, that you would have never thought I would have left early. Would that be a fair assessment?
No, I was surprised when you left, actually.
Right.
I was happy for you, because you found something that you were going to be passionate about, and you're passionate about your work, whatever you do, but I was happy that you left. I was sad to see you leave, because you were in a unit that I used a lot up in narcotics, and I was sad to see you go, but I'm happy for you too.
Yeah, and so we can get into that. I guess really the nexus for me is 7/7 happened, and I met my wife actually 6 months prior to that, and it really had me questioning my future in law enforcement and how long I wanted to do this.
Why is that? Just tell the listener what I know. 7/7 affected us all in different ways, and it still affects us. Mm-hmm. But why did it strike such a chord with you?
I think for me, and I look back at some of my Facebook posts, and I guess to bring this full circle is how my Facebook page started, was I would post a lot of, I guess you could call them, for lack of a better term, rants on my personal Facebook page. And I look back recently at some memories and saw, after Ferguson happened, how I really felt that the law enforcement profession was changing, or more importantly, the nexus or the view of society. So essentially, I just felt like it was changing after Ferguson, and then when 7/7 happened, I think it really put into perspective where I had to. You talk about self-awareness a lot on this podcast, and I guess looking back, that's what I was doing. I was like looking in the mirror, do I want to do this the rest of my life? And I was completely okay with the risks that I knew I was taking on being a police officer, not to mention being an undercover police officer, which is what you're alluding to with narcotics. You're a big fan of narcotics and dope chasing, as it's been documented. But I was okay. I always tell people when they ask me, I say, I was okay getting shot in the face during a narcotic search warrant, if that were the fate that were to happen to me. But I was not okay getting shot in the back. And over a false narrative that we're terrible people out here doing terrible things to people with a certain, agenda or whatever, full of hate and prejudice. And it's just not true. If that was true, I would have quit and done something else a long time ago. So I think that was my kind of nexus. And then personally, just being honest, I think it's a matter of when you're in a police officer, you're in government, right? And so you got to look at it from a perspective of career-wise, financially, what do you want to do? And, the only way you make more money, and this will come into my whole financial thing later, is to make more money as a police officer, you got to put in more hours. Unfortunately, you don't get paid more if you're a better police officer. You don't get paid more like in sales. If you're a really good salesperson, in theory, you could put in 40 hours a week, go home to your wife and kids or whatever, and make a ton of money because you're really good at what you do. But as a police officer, you're pigeonholed to your salaries, and then if you want to make more money, you basically have to be away from your family in the form of, for me, working extra jobs at American Airlines Center, waving your arms around, directing traffic till your arms want to fall off.
Yeah.
So that was another nexus for me. It was like long term. I think I was 33 at the time. Do I want to do this for another 20, 30 years, being relegated to making a set amount of money? And if I wanted to make more, I had to work overtime. So
at the time, did your now wife, did she influence you to, did she have a direction also? It's kind of worried. I know she had to be worried about you going to work, especially after 7/7 happened.
It's funny. When we met, we were in narcotics. I was actually in the meth lab squad at the time, and perception and reality are always different, right? And she had the perception that I was going around when I was undercover, just basically like training day, right? Like hanging out with drug dealers all day, and hanging out in Oak Cliff, just doing crazy things or whatever. And so, no, I mean, she was worried. I think she was a nexus for me to leave because it was more about taking a leap of faith on us and seeing what else is out there and leaving the proverbial safe. I could have stayed on the department. I was making good money. I could have stayed here. I already had weekends off, and I could have just, resigned to the fact that, okay, I'm going to be a Dallas police officer for the next 10, 15, 20 years, regardless of how happy I am personally or how challenged I feel professionally. Again, because, you make good money as a police officer, but you always wonder, like, what else could I do? And not to say that money's everything, right? To me, time is everything. Time home with your family is more important, and time and the ability to go and do the things that you care about, whether it's concerts or sporting events. But my wife, I think, pushed me to just see past the profession. You're more than just a police officer, and I think a lot of folks feel trapped. I get messages all the time on my Facebook page that ask me how to leave law enforcement, and it's tough for me because I obviously am trying to advocate for officers, but at the same time, like you said, you don't blame people if they want to leave, but I'm not trying to push people out of the profession either, because we need good officers, and the more the better, especially in this day and age. And I heard recently you said that I think we're topping out around 17, 18 people in our academies right now in Dallas, and that's problematic, and that's scary.
And we were used to, Chief Foy pushed through academy class that was 81.
Yeah, I heard
at
that.
The time, and then it's down to 17 and 18 starting, and the attrition rate, only like 14 may actually graduate from that class.
Of course.
They may not pass some tests or the physical fitness, or they just flat out quit.
Right.
Which happens.
Yes.
So I want to get into your Officer Next Door page.
Mm-hmm.
Just kind of talk about that, how that got going. You left, and you basically started off just blogging. Yeah,
right. So I moved out to Hawaii, and I think the emotions, like I said, I was posting on my personal Facebook page, and I've been told I have a way with words, a little better when I write, because when I talk, I deviate and go down rabbit holes, and I lose track of what I was going to say, and so that's a struggle that I'm working on. But to answer your question more specifically, I just decided, it's a hobby, but I really, looking back, I think it was therapeutic for me, to put on paper what I was thinking or feeling. And it started out as a blog. I actually had a WordPress website, theofficernextdoor.com. I'll have to give credit to my wife. She's the one that came up with that name. And the reason of the name was basically, I wanted just to share my perspective, my lived experiences, and kind of get my emotions out based on what I experienced as law enforcement, but from the perspective that anyone that reads it could say, oh, well, this is actually just like the officer I know that is maybe a friend of a friend, or literally lives next door. Maybe they have a take-home squad car and they don't, So that was how it started, as basically I took my personal Facebook rants that everyone seemed to like or said that I had a way with words. I started writing articles, and it was literally just anything I had on my heart or in my mind, or just what I felt like I wanted to say. I'd comment on current, because there's no shortage of drama and things going on in the profession across the country, right?
And opinions.
So, and opinions. Everyone's got them, including myself. And so I don't want to ever speak on behalf of officers. I'm not trying to speak for them. I'm just giving my opinion. And so it was my way of also speaking on behalf of the law. I'm trying to be careful with the words, but not speak on behalf, but advocate on behalf or fight for officers, because what people don't understand, again, going back to that perception and reality of my wife thinking I was literally hanging out, but the reality is I wasn't hanging out with drug dealers every day. The perception of police officers, I think, is why they're quiet, is because they're not allowed to go talk to the media and after a shooting or a critical incident, so they have to be quiet. Now that I left the department, I was freed. Basically, I didn't have any repercussions. If I said something wrong or made somebody mad with one of my opinions, I couldn't get called into internal affairs and get called to the carpet. So that was pretty much how it started, and it morphed into the website. And then I grew tired of putting a lot of time and effort into writing an article, picking a photo that obviously wasn't copyrighted, coming up with the title, to post it on Facebook, to only basically see the trend that people would see the title of the article, the photo I chose from it, jump in the comments and start rage commenting about whatever it is they thought I talked about in that article, and they didn't read a single word. So I said, you know what? And I had to pay money for the website, so I'm cheap. So I was like, you know what, let's just get rid of this website and I'll just run a Facebook page. And it grew, and it's grown. I just crossed the threshold of over 75,000 followers. That word creeps me out, but
wait till you get to 100,000. It's really going to creep you out.
Yeah, that's my next benchmark. But I kind of just, it's really been a hobby that kind of has morphed into now sort of a business, actually, and a platform for me to advocate on some of the topics we're going to cover here in a little bit that are important to me. And so that's what keeps me going, and that's where it started. I started just writing and kind of my feelings, and then now it's just basically a Facebook page. I do have an Instagram and Twitter, but those are just, they don't really work for me, and having long form, being able to talk about the topics in a relevant and complete way.
Well, you've really morphed into just being like blogging it and articles to memes, and or you'll have some funny memes. You have a Yellowstone meme that went viral, and then you have a post about an officer, a fallen officer within in the country. Mm-hmm. So you kind of really touch on a lot of different things, and and everything has to evolve to something. Even this podcast has evolved in a lot of different ways, and we're going to continue to do that. We have different ideas, we have different guests, we have different topics we're going to discuss, and I want to keep it fresh. You have to keep it moving along, otherwise everything gets stale.
Yeah.
So you and I have talked offline a lot. You reach out to me literally just about after every episode that I put out.
Yeah.
And thank you for also posting about it, the episodes on your page, and I've had a lot of people reach out, I believe, from your page. They found out about the podcast from your page, and then they reach out to me, thanking me for they like what we do, and I look on, they're a Officer Next Door follower. Thank you.
Good.
So you and I have talked offline about officer wellness.
Yeah.
And I want to get your thoughts on that. I literally just before I came over, I met with Chief Ramirez, and he and Chief Garcia were down in Austin, and there were some bills being put together about officer wellness within the state of Texas, and getting potential grants and programs started for officers to get counseling, either free counseling or different programs for first responders. Mm-hmm. And what he saw was that there's not a lot of departments doing it, not even the larger departments. I mean, Dallas is a top 10 department. I believe Houston PD might be bigger than us, Randy, I think. But they don't have something like this. So when Dallas PD, Chief Garcia tasked Chief Ramirez with starting up a wellness unit, we're all in. And it starts at the top with Chief Garcia having complete buy-in, mm-hmm. and he pushes us, and Chief Ramirez Rubin, he pushes us all the time. I want to get your thought on wellness, what it was like when you were an officer, and what you think of it now.
Yeah, so looking back, I hired on in 2005, and I did go start in God's country in Southeast, where all the great officers started. And
Randy's got a shit look on his face.
Yeah, no, and
it's all relative, perspective and reality.
It is. You're right. Yeah. See, and then in all fairness, I actually Channel 4 was my first choice. Southwest was my first choice, and I ended up at Southeast, and it was definitely a good thing for me, primarily because I lived in Grand Prairie at the time, and I wanted to be busy. I knew that coming down here from Minnesota, and yes, I have a northern accent. There's nothing I can do about it. I've tried to get rid of it, but I wanted to come down here and run around Dallas and actually do real police work. But so going back to the question at hand, in 2005, I hired on, and I think it was old school policing, a lot like what the previous, Clint McNear, his episode, he talked about. It was just basically rub some dirt on it. It was, and I have to say I had a good career. I honestly can't think of any like horribly tragic things that I had to endure just through the everyday to day call answering and things like that. But that doesn't mean there isn't a cumulative effect on it, right? And it just, things kind of build up. And I think there's stressors that they're all different, whether it's just, again, scheduling time away from family, that's a stressor. Maybe it's a monetary thing. Maybe it's just
a leadership thing.
Yeah. And I just want to give it, because I can say this, and I'm not a brown noser. I'm just really happy to see Chief Garcia coming here and being at the helm. It seems like we finally have some leadership here at the Dallas Police Department that has the right priorities, and it couldn't come at a better time, considering where we are as a country and how law enforcement's viewed and the challenges that are presented on a day-to-day basis. So I'm really happy to see Chief Garcia leaning into this and leading from the front. I actually lived in San Diego for the previous 2 years, and I know their police department had a great mental health and wellness unit, and I understand y'all collaborated together. In fact, when I lived there, we reached out and tried to do a few events to help support them as well. So everywhere I've been, I'm always trying to help, people that are doing great things that are helping. So to answer your question, it was non-existent, wellness and mental health and things like that from 2005 to 2018 when I was on the department was just really nothing that was even thought about, talked about, or even at the forefront of anybody's mind, I think. You had a horrible incident, and I think July 7th is probably the most... it's probably, previous to that, I remember the headquarters when it got shot up and everything, but there luckily wasn't any tragic loss of life there.
That was just, he had a plan,
right,
and he didn't execute the plan. The only person that got injured from that, there were some officers injured, but the only death was his own. But there was a plan in place.
Right.
A year later, that guy executed his plan, and we had one of the worst tragedies for law enforcement since 9/11.
Correct. Yeah, 7/7. So prior to that, I think it was just expected in the job that you're going to see, dead infants. You're going to answer fatality car wrecks that just boggle your mind in terms of just what you have to see and digest, and firemen have to do the same. Yeah, looking back, and we made a joke about me coming on here and doing this podcast as me, my actual self. But I kind of laughed, and I told you, I was like, I don't have a story. Like, I don't have anything tragic that happened. I had a great career. I had a great 12 and a half years, and I have no regrets. And that's probably the one good thing, is that I've yet to this day woke up and said, man, I wish I didn't leave law enforcement. So that's like one good thing, but I don't really have a crazy, sad, awesome, tragic story.
Well, you know what? So we started doing this in, I think, August 2021 is the first episode, and episode 9 was a little bit after that, and another person told me the exact same thing. They don't have a great story to tell, and it's Chris Webb. Shout out Chris.
Great guy.
Great guy, great story, great human being, and everybody's got a story. It's just sit them down and talking. You might be surprised.
Right. Well, not every story has to be not every story has to be death or calamity.
Perspective.
It's just life. Things happen. Not everybody.
For sure.
You got days when you go and answer 10 calls and nothing happens, and you go answer one call and all hell breaks loose. So it's
right.
Well, just talking. We once you come on, we could talk about that crazy Sparks chase through all of Southeast, and then what now is South Central. That's a story within itself on what that guy did.
Yeah, that was a good day.
Yeah, it was a great day that you found that. But yeah, we're going to get into that. But going back to wellness,
sure.
Before we started up this unit, you and I talk all the time, but we were talking about this unit, the DPD Wellness Unit. We have a little logo called, the Officer Wellness Longevity, the owl. I posted a lot of pictures on that patch, about that patch and that logo that Alan Holmes created. We're really trying. Chief Ramirez he stays on us hard, and he wants us to succeed, and he wants it to succeed for the department as well as the city, and he wants this unit to be the standard for other departments to follow, and basically a blueprint.
Good.
I think we're on the right track. But I said in a meeting yesterday, we're talking about getting an app for all officers to use that's going to have all the resources right at your fingertips. But that's just one of the tools. I think having the right people in place, from the top down, Chief Garcia to Chief Ramirez, on down to the people he picked for this unit, the messengers are what make a program great.
For sure. Yeah, and to piggyback on that, again, I guess when I mentioned that I didn't have anything tragic, mental health and just the overall mental wellness has just become something that I really believe in. And I think part of that, too, is just being the officer next door on Facebook. I actually have met a lot of different people on different pages. Blue Help, which is now First Help, was really big on supporting officers in their mental health. And, the statistic and the harsh reality of the fact that more officers take their own lives than die in the line of duty is just, I think, a statistic that is just, it's an overwhelming reality that people, I don't think, know is the truth, that we take our own lives more than somebody would, or that happen on a yearly basis, just being, in the dangerous profession that we're in. So when I saw that, and that light bulb went off, I said, man, this is a huge issue. And I need to use this platform to try to raise awareness for this topic.
When I had the idea for this podcast, it really came from a mental health, Dr. T's 3-day seminar. Mm-hmm. And I was seeing first responders up there give their stories, and I would see everybody's reaction. Then I saw the conversation that started after they heard their stories. And hell, Randy and I were working out and kind of start plotting this out, and here we are. But the one of the main missions of this is not just to entertain. I mean, there's some people get entertained by this, but and the DPD now wants to have a culture where it's okay to talk about this, and it's okay, even more importantly, okay to go get help, as opposed to just burying it.
Yeah, that's huge. And I think, I have to say kudos again, not to come on here and pat Chief Garcia's back too hard, but, I think it's important to, in 2005 to 2018, I can't tell you how many officers I knew, and I was definitely known to drink, but not so much as a coping thing for me. It was, and maybe that was it. I was a social drinker. I just didn't like to go home and sit with my thoughts and sit with maybe the rough shift that I had. I like to go out and be among people. I'm a social butterfly kind of person. So that was maybe my coping, and luckily nothing bad ever happened. But I think what I really commend, or what I'm happy to hear with that Gordon, the episode with him, was instead of just sitting back and handing out discipline for every time an officer makes a mistake or does something wrong, you're being proactive in finding solutions, but more importantly, no barriers. So there's not a financial barrier, because you don't have to worry about coming out of pocket. There's no repercussions that are going to come from raising your hand saying you need help. You're not going to be looked at poorly. It's not going to delay like an internal affairs investigation does. It's not going to delay a promotion. So when I heard that in Gordon's podcast, I was just blown away that you've not only opened the door for people to seek help, but you've removed all the barriers. And I heard you say something about, the counselors here that are available with the Safety Officer Foundation are also culturally competent. And I'll share a quick vulnerable moment on that. When we lived in San Diego, obviously we lived there during COVID, the actual lockdowns from 2020 to 2022. And as you can imagine, it wasn't the easiest place to go through COVID, especially in a studio apartment. So there was a point where I was looking for help, and my wife actually went to the counselor first, and I have permission to talk about this, so it's all good. But, she went, and the counselor actually made a somewhat disparaging remark about law enforcement when she was telling her story and kind of giving backstory. He made an insinuation, that was basically an anti-police trope that's very common, that we all beat our wives, and that little lovely trope or whatever. So, needless to say, my poor wife came back from counseling, and she's like, Chris, you can't go to him. You can't. He obviously has a certain perception about policing that isn't going to suit you well, and it's not. What good is that going to be as me as a former police officer to go in and talk about and I imagine the job would come up, right? The emotional baggage I carry from 7/7, and even though I wasn't directly involved, I
You
have
lost
that
friends.
I lost 2 friends that were, I always say, there's 2 of their numbers in my cell phone still to this day. And I have that weird survivor's guilt that I wasn't down there, that I wasn't a part of the solution, I guess, or part of the resolution of that day, that I didn't have a hand in bringing that horrible thing to a close. I was actually off duty and watching it on TV like most others that probably weren't on duty at the time.
In disbelief.
Yeah, in absolute disbelief. But so anyway, the whole thing is it's just so important, and I think it's amazing to see where it's going, and I'm excited to see where it will end up, and it's going to continue to evolve. And I want to use my page and anything I can do to provide more resources to officers and firemen or any first responder alike in regards to this mental wellness. And that kind of leads me into, I've fallen into finance as my career now, and I actually kind of look back and, when I was in narcotics, that was my dream job, right? And I think you knew me.
Yeah.
I kind of found my footing and realized I like chasing dope, and I was very proactive in that regard, and I enjoyed taking people and guns and drugs off the street and felons. And but when I was in narcotics, I look back and I really wasn't happy, and personally. And that, I think there's a lot of factors into your mental wellness. Isn't just, there could be so many factors to why an officer is struggling. It may not just be the horrible things you see at work. Maybe they're very good at compartmentalizing that and not having issues, but maybe their finances aren't in order and they're having to work those extra jobs, and that's taking them away from their family and their kids, and they're missing those t-ball games, or they're not able to coach because they're tied financially. And I think that drains you, that wears you out. And I lived paycheck to paycheck, and I know what that's like. And then, of course, also there's that crutch where you can work extra jobs and overtime, so you don't have that personal accountability. But I think there's a multitude of things with the stress, the concerns, like you said, command staffs and rules and societal pressures now to be perfect, and you're always on duty and you're never off duty, and you're always, it's a lot.
It's
and
symbiotic. Everything affects the other. Like the first domino affects the fifth domino falling, right?
Absolutely. And if there's no time off and there's no real way to disengage and unplug, then it's not. But that's the thing, you always have to have a qualifier, right? Like that's not an excuse for accountability. That doesn't mean you can go out and do things that are wrong or whatever, but it probably gives us some insight as to why I recently saw a story about an officer getting fired who was directing traffic and lost his cool and did something crazy. I don't know what he did or said, but obviously mistreated a citizen over something as silly as directing traffic. And I can speak from personal experience doing that.
Very frustrating.
It is very frustrating. You want to lose faith in the society and, go direct traffic for a while and see, you'll just wonder, man, people are just sheep and they just do whatever. But
it's like reading the comment sections on some post.
Yeah, well, I can attest to that.
Yeah.
You should see my inbox. I think it's a holistic thing, and this officer wellness is great because, again, it may not just be the traumatic stuff that you see that contributes to why an officer might need to reach out to get help. Again, it could be relationship with their spouse, which could be driven by money. It could be the drinking, which is what a lot of people turn to in lieu of counseling. And essentially, when I was on the department, to bring it full circle, like that's really was my only option, is to drink and hang out. And basically what you end up doing is choir practice, right? Where you go hang out with other officers, and that's your way of venting around the campfire, but that's it.
Well, Chris Webb mentioned that too, that he drank because he wanted to get back to that sweet spot of Weber, of happy-go-lucky guys, as opposed to being haunted by what he saw and he did out there, right? And we're social creatures. Usually we hang out with our other cop buddies, right? And we go out for a drink, and we that's how we decompress. But sometimes that's not always good for the mind, body, and soul, and especially going home and or some neglecting family. And then once you get home to family, you go from being a cop to a father or a boyfriend or a father, and people don't know how to juggle that always.
Yeah, I think that's tough. I struggled even with that, and to this day, I don't have children, but just dealing with spouses, girlfriends, and now my wife, what do you share? What do you tell them? And it's unfortunate because I think a lot of times you just want to go home on those tough days and just be left alone, but your spouse wants to engage with you and, more importantly, make you feel better, right? But you're just like, nah, I don't even want to talk about it.
Well, Dr. T talks about she has a chart. There's a line there. Everybody's got the median, right? And then the highest you go up through your day, whether it's responding to a shooting, getting in a foot chase, getting in a fight, or getting to just a scary ass situation, the highest you go, that's as low as you crash. So you're in a hypervigilant state for 8 to 10 hours, and then you go home. Then you got to come down from that, and people don't know how to really deal with that. And then when you go home, some of your significant other, your kids, don't understand it either. Why are you grumpy? Why do you want to go be alone, get into a video game, or just go sleep?
Right. Yeah, that's definitely a challenge in this profession. I think on it doesn't matter where you work. It doesn't matter if you're in a small town or if you're in a big town. This profession will challenge you and your personal relationships. And it's funny because we all know that, and we've known that for years. When I hired on in 2005, they said you will change, and sure enough, my mom. Basically after a year, because she'd always ask, she loved the fact that I was a police officer. Shout out, Mom. And she would always ask and love the war stories. But then after a while, I grew tired of telling them, and she could see the change in me. I went from this, everybody's awesome, everyone's a good person, to this very, negative world.
Cynical.
You become cynical because you're a product of what you're exposed to every day on a daily basis. And as much as you want to tell yourself there's good people out there, unfortunately, if you never see good people, you lose sight of that, and it's tough. But at the end of the day, you got to do the best you can to remember we're all human, and I think that's the aspect of the OWL unit, is just understanding that, again, accountability is paramount in this profession. We have to hold ourselves to that higher standard, and that is never compromisable at all whatsoever. But what can we do to understand that we are human and we are going to make mistakes, and what are the things that contribute to why those mistakes happen? Again, the drinking. Why do officers get DWIs? Because maybe that's like me. I admit I probably was lucky and stupid a lot of times where I was out being social because that was my coping mechanism as a single Dallas police officer. I wasn't married, didn't have a wife or kids to go home to. I didn't want to go home and relive that 8-hour shift a lot of my times. I just wanted to go out and be social. And so this OWL unit, I think, is phenomenal because it's giving people an outlet outside or other than just going home and, like Gordon shared, drinking your sorrow away, or your stress, or your anxiety, or depression, or any number of things. And let's not forget, there's people that are predispositioned to have those things before they become a police officer, and it just gets exacerbated by the profession, what they're exposed to on a daily basis. Even if you're in a great, like me, where I was in narcotics and I was in my dream job.
Well, and the dream job you had, that's kind of the creme brulee of narcotics. That lab unit you were in, that was what it was, either that or a task force officer, and that was the top. That was the pinnacle for that unit.
And the irony there is that, and I look back and I look at it as an actual mistake that I made. And what I mean by that is that I look back at what filled my cup. What was my currency? My currency was working really hard when I was here at work, but I also really cared a lot about being with my friends. I had a very robust group of friends here in Dallas that were both police officers, and then I played hockey. So I had what I called my hockey friends that were non-police friends, and that was important to me. And so when I went to the lab squad, like you said, it was, as much as it's a creme de la creme of the narcotics unit, or viewed that way other than task forces, I was on call 365 days a year, 24/7. I'll never forget, I was northbound 35 with a full car of friends headed to a country concert up in Denton, and my phone rings, and Sergeant Sutton's like, "Hey man, we just got a lab," and I'm like, "Oh man,"
Turn around.
Yeah, I got to
kick him out on the side of the road and let him
yeah,
walk.
Right. I just 35 in Empire Central. Don't worry about it. You'll be fine. Or I had to be that terrible teammate that didn't show up because I had other obligations, and then you feel like you're letting your team down, and that's embarrassing too. And I don't want to be that guy either. But it all that goes into the pot when you look at what truly makes you happy. And so, like I said, I think this OWL unit is phenomenal. I will always do everything I can to support it. And I just think it's just invaluable, and I hope to help you guys make it the standard in the country.
Thank you. Yeah, I can't tell you how many times we have a little private office in headquarters, and we have a doorbell out there every day. That doorbell rings with officers and also the non-sworn showing up, ringing the doorbell with something. Wow. It's really shocking to have that many people approach us, and it's even more shocking. Like Gordon, he came forward with a story, but we've got other people that have utilized that new or alcohol leave policy that are, there's somebody right now utilizing it, and that's kind of unheard of people going and checking themselves into a 30-day inpatient rehab facility. Yeah, it's a lot of bravery that comes with that.
I think, and that's when I said no barrier access to this kind of stuff is so crucial, because I shared my little vulnerable personal story. But, before I even got to the point where I said that I wanted help, you've probably thought about it 10, 15, 20 times, and then you call the number and no one answers, so you just say, I'm good.
Well, back then, what kind of help was there? Who would you have called?
But yeah, but before I left law enforcement, no clue. Now, assist the officer did have, I think we had that counseling program a long time ago. It just wasn't utilized very long. And in fact, I guess I'll get really personal. Like I actually used that a long time ago when I was previously engaged, and her and I went to it. And I believe back then we got 7 sessions that were completely free. And so no barrier, there wasn't a financial nexus that I was worried about. And
there's a stigma that's always been attached to that.
That's the other aspect of it, and that's unfortunate. And hearing Clint McNear talk about it in his episode about how, like, especially at Garland, and I totally can understand, because that is not a department that is full of soft and cuddly people, right? They set the standard of taking names and kicking ass, right? And I loved working. I worked Northeast for a while, and whenever I'd make traffic stops that bordered that Garland border, man, it was a whole nother dynamic. Anyway, it was that back in the day there was nowhere to turn. And so, but even worse, I think, is that if you finally do muster up the courage to ask for help, and then you get someone like I ran into that wasn't culturally competent, then you're just even more turned off to it. And ultimately, I'll be honest, I never saw it. And so to this day, I've never been to counseling other than when I used it when I was previously engaged. So that was like 2010, 2011. So
Dottie had a similar experience whenever she went to a counselor and they were not culturally competent, and it turned her off. But it also motivated her. Damn it, this is needed. I'm going to do this. I'm going to be there for my fellow officers. And
Absolutely.
That's what she's doing now. And she's our longest tenured, and also our one of the biggest like most of our clientele go to her. I think half of them go to Dottie, and she is super busy.
Yeah, I remember that. I think in her episode, or when she was on this podcast, she mentioned that, and again, I can speak to that. It was a very disheartening, and there's another gap too, and there's people like myself that have left the profession, whether they've gone on to be successful realtors, or me being in finance, or wherever they went to. Where do those folks turn for help? They did 10, 15, 20 years of this profession, and then once you're no longer on the police department, you don't have access to the OWL unit anymore.
Yeah, you don't have access to the ATO account. You're really disconnected, but you also don't have a mindset where it's okay to still do that. And now this wellness unit, we're trying to change that culture that it's like if you have a bum knee, or if you have a back injury, you go to the doctor. It's the same thing. If you're off, go. I go for maintenance. Go for maintenance at the very least. You may actually sit down with somebody, an expert, a specialized, trained third party that's having a look into your life. They may see something that you don't see about yourself, and they can kind of point it out to you, and then give you a skill set to try to get better.
Yeah.
It's not for everybody, but it doesn't hurt to try.
I would liken it to working out. You go to the gym to try to improve yourself and be healthier, and it's no different. You're working out your brain or your mental side of your wellness, right? And I don't see any reason why that should be, and we've changed. Like going back to, like I was saying, Garland, where obviously that was the culture back then, and maybe even a little bit here in Dallas. I don't think necessarily there was the whole shaming thing. I just think it wasn't even an idea that people thought about going to get help, because if there wasn't necessarily the widespread resources. ATO counseling did exist. And maybe unfortunately 7-7 was the nexus that really brought the true need, but we were overlooking the actual need that was there prior to 7-7. So
things were changing around the time when you said you were going, because I remember the bills started going up, and we were very suspicious. Even though we were providing, I think we were kind of suspicious. Like, why is this doctors? Why where are all these people coming from? I guess because we didn't know that people were using it, and I guess we weren't even prepared for the amount of use that it was getting. And this was even before 7.7. So, but after 7.7, it exponentially it blew up.
Hell, Randy, at least from 2021 to 2022, we're up almost 100%. I mean, like from the monies that are spent just towards the counseling.
I bet, I don't know if there's a way to quantify it, but I think a lot of it has to do with the culture change of these younger officers are more willing to go than what people were on when we were. They had ways of dealing with it, whereas these young officers, and there's older officers too, but they're taking advantage of it just because I don't know if it's a cultural thing or a generational thing, but they're a lot more open to using it than what it was 20 years ago.
Well, I tell you what, there's a lot of older tenure officers that reach out to me,
and I'm not saying they're not.
No, but I think, but it goes back to the culture now is different than it was in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s. We're definitely in the right direction. But that being said, you need something in place to facilitate that and to keep pushing that ball down the road.
Right. Well, I think it was a blind spot, right? I think that's where, and you said if you saw the increase before 7/7 2016, yeah. So we're talking, but you know what I bet that was Ferguson, because Ferguson, I believe, was 2014, and so it's not it's not outlandish to assume that Ferguson was probably a nexus to where I think officers really felt like the country was turning their backs on us, and no matter what we did, even if it was right and justified, we were wrong, and we were going to be crucified in the eye of the public, and we were looked down on, and we, and we're basically feeling like we're an enemy. And I think that's really hard for officers because we all say the silly thing, why do you want to do this? I want to help people. But if you're doing this, and the best officers are the ones that view this as a calling, not as a paycheck. And if that is your true ethos and why you became a police officer, feeling like an entire country thinks you're a terrible person goes completely against the grain of everything you stand for. You're there every day to help people. But when Ferguson happened, I wonder if that was maybe just unbeknownst to us why we saw a rise, and then obviously 7/7.
It was going up before then. Was Ferguson 14 or 15?
I think it was 14.
Yeah, this is 11-12 when
wow.
These numbers started going up. That they were very suspicious of stuff going on. But
I think a lot of that, though, Randy, is the reputation of the Assistant Officer Foundation. Counselors start getting out there, mm-hmm. and they start seeing the Dottie Claggets are involved and other
and I have no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. It was just kind of mentality around here. It was just very suspicious because we're used to it, but then all of a sudden, oh wow, people are using it. We might not have been prepared for it like we probably should have been. But
sure,
everything grows. You only know what you know, and
there's a blind spot.
Right.
Again, and that's interesting to hear. And I think ultimately when something's new, you're going to be suspicious. Like, why is this trend happening, and what's the reason behind it? I'm just thankful that it has evolved to where it is now. Maybe and we can beat ourselves up over being overdue. It doesn't matter, right? Like we can always just look forward and be better. 1% better tomorrow. We're all better for it.
Perfectly said. So now that you got us cornered, this is one of our longer messages from the host. Yeah. But you don't come in town very often, so I'm gonna milk the hell out of you. But what else do you want? Yeah, you like that? Now that you have us cornered, we got any complaints about or critiques or improvements we could do, or what would you like to hear from us?
I just think you just got to keep doing what you're doing, and you're doing a great job, in my opinion, of hitting on different topics and different angles of the profession, and even bringing in like Bob Sturm and different people from the community, because we're all interrelated. Like you said, what makes this city, Dallas, great and are the people behind the scenes, like the Caruth Foundation mm-hmm. and the Dickies Foundation, and people that are behind the scenes that I know Ross Pro's always stepped up and helped us with AR-15s or helicopters or different things. I don't have any complaints. I've been saying for a year, my biggest complaint is you've been bugging me to start my own podcast.
Yes.
And we actually talked about this yesterday, is your intro and your outro and your just overall production quality is so high. I'm like, there's no way I could do that. So that was my excuse.
That's not because of either one of us.
Hey,
I know that's Danny Canetti.
That's a guy named Danny Canetti. Yeah. And you know what? I'm throwing this out there. He's on SWAT. He's one of the main trainers. He's completely loyal to that unit, to making it better and keeping everybody safe. I can't get him on to want to do his own episode about himself, because that guy is I think he's DPD's most interesting guy in the world. Yes.
Yeah.
So
you ain't lying.
He sends a video yesterday of them hitting a recording studio dope house, and he's literally picks up a guitar that's probably not tuned in, half-ass if it is. And he's sitting there just playing a guitar.
Yeah.
He can play piano. This guy is so talented beyond this profession, and he's got an incredible story. I mean, I was sitting there listening to him at Dr. T at her seminar talk for like just 15 minutes, and God, I wish I would have had a recorder then. You should have heard that. You should have seen the crowd engaged in what he was saying. Some of it was about me that I didn't even know he felt that way. So I want to put him on the spot. I want everybody out there, all the ATO fans, to write me about and let's do like a email petition for a Danny Canetti episode, because I think I smell a two-parter with him.
Yeah, the world needs it. I'll start texting him and relentlessly bothering him. And he'll
just block your number.
Yeah, he will. He won't. That won't take long. And if it isn't already blocked, I worked with him at Southeast, and then I actually worked with him in narcotics before he went over to SWAT. And I can honestly say you're absolutely right. He reminds me of the Dos Equis man. He's the most interesting man in the world, only because of just really, really all the things that he does outside of law enforcement. Because again, he's more than just a Dallas Police SWAT officer, right? He has the professional things he did in the music industry prior to becoming an officer,
professional rock climbing, ranked.
Yeah, he's an impressive fella, and it's unfortunate, and I'll just put the pressure on him. You're doing a disservice to the world by not telling your story, Danny Canetti.
Well, and one thing, he is such a loyal friend. Mm-hmm. God, I mean, and that's hard to find. I've got friends like him and Randy that are it's a small circle, and everybody's got those show up at 2 a.m. with a shovel to help you, that kind of friends, but he's one of them.
Yeah, but so to answer your question, I think the only critique I have is just to keep going. I know you said you were thinking about wrapping it up after 50 episodes or whatever, and we
squashed that.
Good, and more importantly, we talked about this too, is bringing maybe some more people into the fold that want to get involved to keep the torch going, where maybe you do get burned out or you want to take a step back or take some time off. But this is a really great medium, and obviously podcasts aren't going away, and they're here forever. It's pretty neat to know that you can upload this into these, Apple and Spotify and different places, and they're out there forever.
Well, what I've found most rewarding from this is not only just my peers within the Dallas Police Department and the local PDs and firefighters even have reached out to me, federal agents reached out, is the people from the Officer V. Hobbs from Houston PD sending me 5 challenge coins and Houston PD patches. Eric Hart from Plant City, Florida PD. I get people all the time reaching out. Agent Davison with ATF. She's in Oklahoma. She reaches out all the time and talks about it. I just get so many people reaching out saying, hey, thanks for what you do. Matt from Cedar Rapids, Iowa, he's actually going to come down in 2 weeks and tour they want to start a wellness unit up because they've heard about our wellness unit, and he's a big fan of the podcast, and he got his command staff on board, and they're going to come down for a 3-day visit. It's really... there's divides everywhere, and that's really coming up with this name, Bridging the Divide. We try to do that in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, I like that, and I actually have here, I'm glad you said that, because that's the other thing is we don't always have to agree. When you have your intro, you say we don't always agree, and I think in this culture right now, and again, because most topics in law enforcement are controversial in a lot of ways, or they're high emotional, right? Like it's if there's a use of force and someone's killed or whatever, that's an emotional thing that our society will get emotional about, but it's also emotional for us. But I just think this long form talking and why, like Joe Rogan, for example, is so popular is instead of just slinging zingers online at each other on social media and being angry where nothing actually is cultivated from that, having these discussions. And you know what would maybe be, there's a great idea just came out of this just organically.
Get Joe Rogan on? Yeah.
Get Joe Rogan. Yeah. Well, he's down in Austin now. Maybe even having an anti, or a person that's not a real huge fan of police on here, and maybe we have facilitate some sort of conversation that we can have an amicable. That's one of my goals if I actually get a podcast up and running.
We've actually sorry, I almost said your name. We actually have that, and there's a plan in place, and there's some episodes that we're talking about. And if you go back to that dynamic warrant episode with Baines and Girdler, the original plan was to have a defense attorney on for that episode. She broke her ankle a day before we were going to set to record, and we just had to revamp and get it going without her, and it sucked because I think that other side of the coin would in a different perspective would have added to that episode. It was a great episode, but
Right.
I think that was the original plan. So we have that in mind, and I do want to reach out to the other side of the aisle and get some different perspectives and conversation, as opposed to just posting something shitty and disappearing.
Yeah, well, because nothing good comes from staying in your own echo chamber and your own, confirmation bias, right? Like I try very hard on my page to, there's 75,000 quote followers or whatever, but I post something, I honestly can't keep track of the comments and things like that, and then there's very pro police people that follow me, and they get mad if someone comes into the comments and is saying anti-police things or maybe has an opinion that differs from theirs, and they'll tag me and be like, ban this person. I'm like, no.
No, you want that.
Yeah.
You want that dissenting voice, because if you're all like-minded, what good is it to
That's boring.
talk? Yeah, I want to hear the other side. I want to hear argue, because I need to be validated. I know we're just and right with the way we look at it, and I think these people hearing the negative stuff for them is like, okay, we know we're doing the right thing, because you can't have like-minded people at the table, because you're not going to get anything done all the time.
No, the thing is, though, maybe you can sit and you can give me information to maybe change my mind and look at it from a different angle too. Maybe I can give you something to make maybe where you think a little bit twice about it. Maybe not. Maybe some people are just so dug in their opinion, and that's okay.
True.
But I think it's good to talk about things and to get information out there from both sides. That way, you're just not just on one side and you believe one way, and there's no change in your mind. I don't think that's constructive at all as a human being, not just a professional.
Well, I think a lot of times we want to humanize the cops, and I think sometimes cops also need to humanize the other side too, because I think we probably have a bad habit about not humanizing them, and we need to do better to do that, to where we can talk better and make a lot more progress than what we have been doing.
I couldn't agree more, and I think it's important. We talk about complacency a lot in law enforcement, but I think, to your point, there's a lot of complacency in the sense that you forget that you're dealing with folks. Like, it's the complacency in repetition, right? Like, you answer that first burglary call, and it's a big deal that first time, but someone's house got broken into and personal items got stolen. But after you've answered that call 100 times, it's like, to them, that's horrible, right? Your home just got violated, your TV's gone, or whatever else. But as an officer, you're callous to it, and you're right. And more importantly, it's like, well, I don't want to hear your opinion because you've never been a police officer, so your opinion's invalid. But yeah, no, I couldn't agree more, and I think, that's why I try very hard not. Now, I do have a limit. If you're going to troll and you're just going to say things that are just outlandish, or you're just trying to get a rise and troll, and you're not interested in actual discourse, I will ban you. But I try not to. But yeah, anyway, it's
Randy, you got some. We're having our upcoming Dallas Police Association.
The 29th annual Cops Cop banquet is this weekend, and you'll probably hear this after it. But I want to thank a couple of sponsors. The first time we've had multiple sponsors: Bob Gorsky and his firm, Lion Gorsky.
His episode's up next.
Yeah, they've always been a big title sponsor for us, but this year we had six additional groups help us out with expenses. North Central Ford and Josh Stamper, he's great. You need a car, go to him. He'll take care of you. Dallas Avionics, they've been a sponsor. They help with Purse Bingo. First time them helping out with Cops Cop. Brotherhood of the Fallen, they do great work getting officers to funerals across the country. They're a big sponsor. They're a good sponsor this year.
I want to give a shout out real quick to Carter Malou for his donation for our raffle item. Thank you.
All right, then we got Hunt Oil. They're a sponsor. Kevin Navarro and his group. They reached out, and they're bringing some people and helping take care of one of the monthly winners.
Jane and Jim Molino, big sponsors, are big contributors to us.
And then we also have we got two more. Roll Call. People might not like them, but they've been very, they're getting ready to do some stuff with the department, but they're also very given to the ATO and helping us out with all kinds of things. And the last one is Combined Insurance. They're through an organization in Houston that we've done some stuff, but they help officers out and provide insurance, and they're a big sponsor too. So I'd like to thank all those guys for giving us money and helping us cut some of the expenses. It's a big event.
Thank you.
awesome. Well, I think that's a perfect way to wrap this up.
You stole my shit. Thank
Yeah,
you.
buddy.
Thank you so much for being here. It's been too long since I've seen you. I'm glad that you're actually going to go, and you and your beautiful wife are going to go to Cops Cop, and we're going to have a good time. We're going to reminisce.
Yeah.
And this episode, our message from the host, I think I'm going to probably put this out and It's going to be a couple weeks. I'm not going to get it out before the cops cop, but it's going to maybe like a Valentine. It's going to be a Officer Next Door Valentine's Day episode, and it's Valentine's Day was the only second time of the year you can actually slam down your computer when your significant other walks in and not get in trouble.
Yeah,
So,
sure.
All right.
Well, thanks for having me. I appreciate it, and I look forward to being back and helping y'all out with this OWL unit.
Thank you, brother.
Thank you.
Sweet. It's good.